Well, hello! I make it 3 o'clock in my neck of the woods here in Northern California, and it is tea time. It is time for a live! Time for a little video. Today's teacup was a gift to me from a convention I attended a while ago, and I'm sorry to say I don't remember which convention. I'm drinking chai this afternoon, and I hope you are joining me. Hello, Charity darling. Hello to everybody tuning in. Hi. Yay. Hi, Frankie. As always, please let me know where you're tuning in from if you would like to, because it makes me happy to see eyeballs from all over the place. Let me know what you're drinking, if you're drinking anything, because 'tis the season. Yeah, who am I joking with? It's always the season to be drinking. It's 3 o'clock here, so it's a little early to have booze yet, but I am seriously considering it. But like I said, I'm just having chai at the moment. What else is going on? Before I forget, I want to show you all this, which is the cover for Vixen Ecology. This is a short story, so it will be a digital only release, and I showed that cover to my newsletter, and it is going to be released to my newsletter. I haven't decided yet. It's going to be for charity, so it'll be probably relatively low priced, and you can pay a little bit more if you want to. That's what I'm thinking about. Probably next month or the month after. It is in revisions right now, so it's gonna kind of depend on booking my copy editor and stuff like that. But there it is. That's the cover. I freaking love the cover. I don't know if you can really see, but it has a little bit of raindrops in the background. That is, of course, a fox, and that is Mana in the center, or my artist interpretation of Mana, whom I love. So it is Mana and Lovejoy's short story. I had a lot of requests for this after I finished the Enforcer Enigma. Was that the last one? Yes, the Enforcer Enigma. Because I kind of dropped Mana and Lovejoy in the background. So I picked them back up again and gave them a little reunion short story. So I hope you guys will like that. But if you want it, if you want this, you gotta be on the newsletter. That's the deal for this one. Yes, I will eventually release it wide, but who knows when I'll get around to doing that, because it's me, and I'm pretty lazy these days, turns out. Anyway, happy holidays to everybody. Yeah, I guess holidays, we could talk about that. We can talk about family, we can talk about Vixen Ecology some more. But I put holidays and families in for the live today because it's that time of year. I say happy holidays because I was raised agnostic, or at least mostly agnostic, and so that's why I don't really have a thing I commit to, shall we say. My mother is technically Jewish, but is pretty agnostic. My dad is lapsed, I guess, Lutheran or something. So, but hardcore skeptic and atheist. My mother came to the US and, like I always said, like, pretty much embraced any parts of tradition that involved food. So we have strange holiday traditions that all revolve around food. And so after my parents got divorced, her current partner, basically my stepdad, is Jamaican. So more food. It's all about the food in my family holidays. So yeah, that's kind of what we do. We get together and we eat stuff. And I pretty much instituted a policy when I sort of came of age where I was like, I don't really like to give gifts of stuff very much. I'd rather give gifts of experiences and food. So that's what we do in my family, is we tend to give each other like just yummy things we've discovered over the year from Trader Joe's or what have you, or amazing chocolates that I'm always finding, like Nick's stuff. So yeah, that's kind of how the holidays are in my family. Usually Thanksgiving is the big holiday for us. Again, it is Thanksgiving thrown by a expat British woman and a Jamaican man, so it is its own version of Thanksgiving in a very strange way that mostly revolves around how much food can we stuff in our faces. And last year, Trevor, my stepdad, jerked the turkey, which was amazing, which made the gravy spicy, and my heart possibly exploded with delight over this thing, because gravy is maybe one of my favorite foods. I could just drink gravy, and then I love spicy food, so Jamaican spiced gravy. Anyway, so that was amazing. This year we had lasagna and I made apple pie for no good reason whatsoever for Thanksgiving, just because we felt like it, and there's only a couple of us, so we'll just do whatever we want. Katie wants to know what my favorite weird holiday food is. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Oh, look, I'm bouncing. I'm so excited. So, like I said, now my new favorite thing is Jamaican jerk gravy. That's my new favorite thing. But a weird holiday food that we have had as a tradition in my house my whole life. First of all, I didn't think it was weird because I grew up in a beach town in Northern California. And for those who haven't experienced that, the end of November is the beginning of Dungeness season, crab season. So we have always started Thanksgiving with crab as like the appetizer. And because again, Northern California and the weather's actually usually really nice around Thanksgiving, we always have crab on the porch, in the garden, and champagne. And that's how we start Thanksgiving. And I think this is the best. I love shellfish. The other tradition we had as a child is similar, which was Christmas Eve. We always, my parents would spread newspapers or ripped open paper bags all over the floor, and we would sit in the middle of the floor on this newspaper, and we would have cracked crab dipped in garlic sauce or garlic butter, and then like just a loaf of crunchy French bread that you would just break off a chunk. And that was always Christmas Eve dinner in my family as well. So those are a couple of my quote unquote weird holiday traditions. The other one is my mom is famous for her chutney, which is, like Branston's pickle for the Brits who are tuning in, or, chutney is the name I've always known it as. She makes a apple green tomato chutney at the end of the harvest season, always, because she's a gardener, so there's always green tomatoes on the vine, and there's always extra apples and stuff, so you just pick them and make chutney. And she's renowned for this chutney. People demand chutney every year. They line up. The house always smells like chutney while she's cooking it in this huge pot on the stove. And so one of the things we always have with roasts, whatever we roast, is chutney. So there's always a little pot of cranberry sauce, and I insist on the gelatinous kind with the rings visible. And then there's a little pot of my mom's chutney. And I was doing one of my stints of graduate school in the UK, and I decided to introduce everybody to an American Thanksgiving tradition in my international dorm. And one of the things I had was my mom's chutney, because for me it was traditional. And I had two of my very best friends in graduate school were Russian, or one of them was Russian, one of them was Kazakh. And they both thought the chutney was the greatest thing in the world. And I have this enduring memory of my friend Irena just taking the leftover chutney at the end of the meal and just eating it. Just eating the chutney with a spoon, because she was like, this is amazing. So yeah, so those are some of my strange food ways. I love like the weird family food traditions that different families have over the holidays. Like the thing that makes it so that it wouldn't be it wouldn't be that holiday if you didn't have that food, like these little memories. I remember I dated a very delightful young gentleman from the Midwest, shall we say. I don't want to shame any parts of the United States, but they have a tradition, or his family did, of green Jell-O at holidays, so specifically Thanksgiving, and they do the green Jell-O in like a bundt pan thing, right? So it has a hole in the middle. And then they would mix canned fruit and I think sour cream, like swirled into the green jello, which I think was lime jello, right? And this is not a dessert. This is served kind of like the cranberry sauce as part of the main meal. And I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. I love weird gelatinous foods. It made me unbelievably happy. I have never seen it since anywhere. And that is something that I'm like, well, if I were the kind of person who did, you know, like a Thanksgiving or when and if I take over the reins, I might introduce weird green jello because that made me happy. Right, I'm gonna do a little scrolling and see if I missed some questions because I think I did. Oh, there's a lot. Hi, everybody. As usual, I just scan for a question mark at the beginning of a sentence. So if you have a question for me, a question mark at the beginning is great. And Charity asks, with the pandemic, am I still doing my Dungeness Crab? Sadly, no. We did get offered crab as like transported, like secretly low contact crab transport from my hometown. But I am really the one who loves it in the family, and it is very messy and stinky and hard to dispose of if in an urban setting, shall we say, a whole crab. So I declined. I grew oysters as well. I grew up with both of those things, so it's not as exciting and thrilling to me in terms of a unique food. We often eat crab at my mom's place in particular. The town I grew up in is very, how do I put this? It's a very interesting town. It is a kind of off-grid, unincorporated, weird, hippie town. Like the biggest festival was the Sun Festival kind of thing. But also the 4th of July was a really big thing because there was a huge Portuguese farming community there. So it was this weird mix of like poet communes and Portuguese farming town and fishermen that kind of all managed to coexist in a very small, very remote village. And that's what I grew up with. And the village has and had a really strong barter system. And so my parents often traded for things like crab. So even though I didn't grow up with very much money at all, you know, you just caught the fishermen off the dock and traded something possibly illicit for crab. And that was, you know, that was Christmas. So, you know, it was a strange upbringing. I'm very glad. I mean, it was a very safe town. It was a very fun place to grow up. But Jameson asks, what food is the most prevalent at the holiday gatherings? Well, weirdly, it's actually desserts, because for Thanksgiving, at least, which is the big one, my mother insists on doing almost all the savory cooking. It's just, she loves it. I try and help, but she doesn't, you know. Anyway, parents. So what she says to everyone who wants to come, and we usually have big Thanksgivings, we do 20 plus Thanksgivings, people, is that everyone should bring a dessert. And so we end up with like a dessert bar at Thanksgiving in particular, which is like 12 or 13 different desserts, pies, puddings, you name it. And so there's always more dessert than anything else. I am a sugar addict, so this makes me very, very happy and very, very unwell and slow moving at the very end of the day. Because I have to try every single dessert, always. There's almost nothing I don't like eating. Lavender asks, how am I managing to keep in touch with family? Well, I had some over the holidays, I had some very hilarious incidents with my parents in particular and trying to get them to talk over FaceTime or Zoom, and they failed. So just by telephone. I talk to my mom regularly, but then she's a chatty type, so she will call me if I don't call her once a week at least. And then my dad and I are notoriously bad communicating, so like occasionally I'm like, I should check to make sure there's proof of life. And I'll be like, Dad, are you still alive? Because we have that kind of sense of humor with each other. We both have a very dark sense of humor. And that's pretty much it. I'm fortunate in that my dad's girlfriend, and my dad is 86, but his girlfriend is a bit younger than him and is bubbled in with him and keeping him company. So he has somebody checking up on him and keeping him company. And before we went back into lockdown, we would do social distance, like wide picnic table proof of lives with each other. We live an hour and a half away from each other, so we'd just drive to a little spot and be like, okay, everybody's okay? Okay, good. And then my mom has Trevor, and also she has podded, I guess, with her renter, who is also one of her best friends, my kind of de facto aunt. Since my mom is an expat and my dad is, what little family he has had was from the East Coast, and I grew up here in California, I've always had a nuclear family, and so my parents, especially my mother, is a big found family, as in she just adopts people constantly into the family. Now she's with Trevor, and Trevor has 4 kids, 3 of whom I see regularly at holidays as well, and they all have partners now, or mostly have partners now, and nibblings. So I have 3 nibblings. So I actually have a sort of expanded actual family, which was a first for me when they got together. I grew up pretty solitary. So yeah, but solitary in that way of like, I was always surrounded by community because my mom is notorious for taking in strays. So I've always had a crazy sort of eccentric aunts and uncles and aunties, and all of them sort of creatives and poets and artists and stuff. So yeah, that's again hippie upbringing. So yeah, so keeping in touch, mostly phone now that we're back into pretty severe lockdown here. Yeah, and then I have sort of collected friends and writer friends and stuff, and I do sort of Zoom calls with people, and there's you guys who I get to see this way, which, believe it or not, is really helpful for me. So thanks for showing up and reminding me that other people are out there. Yeah, so I've like writing groups that I see once a week or so, that sort of thing. And that's family for me too. My kind of definition of family is pretty absorbing, I guess, by training. I'm scanning to see if we have other questions. Reese asks what my thoughts are on fruitcake. They are extensive, which should be, of no surprise to anybody because it's a food, and I always have lots of thoughts on foods. I was very against fruitcake initially, and then I met other places' takes on fruitcake, and my eyes were opened. So there's the Italian bread take on fruitcake, panna cotta, or not panna cotta, a panettone, which is great. I do like candied fruit, and I do like rum. So these 2 things have evolved my taste in fruitcake. So if, like rum raisin, I know it makes me sound like I'm a million years old, but rum raisin is like one of my favorite ice cream flavors. I love the flavor of it. And so things that have that kind of rum raisin-y taste to them, I genuinely like. I have never had like figgy pudding, plum pudding, Christmas pudding, the British boiled fruit lard-based pudding, or steamed. Like originally it was boiled, it's now steamed mostly. I've never really had one of those. Now my grandmother did make a variant on it, and I did have it when I was a kid, but it was very boozy, and I wasn't into booze when I was a child. So I think I probably would like it now, but I don't know, because I never got to really taste it when I had an adult palate. Her technique was you would make the Christmas pudding the year before Christmas. So each year you were eating last year's Christmas pudding, and during the interim, the Christmas pudding sat in the cupboard and got occasionally taken out and doused with booze, which both preserved it and added to its flavor. And then at Christmas, you brought it out and set it on fire. So I'm very sad that I never really got to eat that, because I imagine I would have liked it, because I imagine it would have tasted like rum and dried fruit. So what's not to love? But yeah, so my take on fruitcake is I feel like in America in particular, it gets a really bad rap, but that there are places and variants that I genuinely do like. My mother loves fruitcake, so does my best friend. So I am surrounded by fruitcake eaters. There's nothing wrong with this, I don't think. But yeah, so there are good fruitcakes out there, but I do feel like you need to like those two flavors. You need to like the flavor of booze, and you need to like the flavor of candied or dried fruits. Oh, Robert wants to know what I've been stockpiling in my cupboards and treating myself with over the season, the festive season. And Robert says mince pies. Weirdly, even though I have a very British background and mostly upbringing, mince pies were not part of that. My mom, I guess, has never been a mince pie person. So no, not mince pies for me. My dad is a great lover of marzipan, being Danish by heritage and initially anyway. So marzipan has always been a sort of thing, like the marzipan apricot chocolate things. Also Pfeffernüsse, which is how he was taught to pronounce it. I don't know how other people pronounce it, but Pfeffernüsse, which are a little cookie that you can buy the really German style, which I think is a kind of a hard sugar coating. The kind we always had as Danes had a powdered sugar coating. They're sort of a spiced cookie, a spiced sugar cookie, basically. So those are something that I will kind of hoard sometimes. Mostly it's chocolate. I love chocolate. I'm not a chocoholic, but it is one of the things that I kind of permit myself to have specific chocolate things. Penguin cookies or Tams. No, they're not the same thing, but they're kind of the same thing. Which are like a biscuit cookie with like an Oreo kind of style with something in the middle, chocolatey, and then usually dipped and coated in chocolate. They're square. I love those. I always get those in my stocking. I always get jelly babies at Christmas in my stocking. So we always had a tradition of getting a hamper from the UK around Christmas time, and in it would be all of the sweets that my mother and I grew up with and loved and could not get in the United States, and tea, and Marmite. All things that you can now get online and ship to the United States, but back then you couldn't. So I will have those things also that are just like memory candies from the UK that aren't necessarily Christmas things, but are just like things I associate with Christmas. So it was the only time I really got to have them. Also, I was raised pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? Clean, I guess. Mostly vegetarian and no processed foods, generally speaking. And so Christmas was like one of the few times I got to actually have candy and chocolate. And so I associate it with those two things quite a bit. So that's what I stockpile. Lavender wants to know if I have any new Asian drama recommendations. Well, I put He's Coming to Me in my newsletter, but in case you missed that, that is the one. It's from GMM TV. It's Thai, and it is a paranormal romance about a ghost and a boy who fall in love, and it is great. I highly recommend it because there's a mystery involved, because the ghost thinks he died of natural causes, and the boy, for various paranormal reasons, know that he did not, so they have to figure out why and how he really died. And it's also a romance, and it's so cute, and it's great. And it does have a happy ending, even though if it's a boy and a ghost, so who knew? So that's one of my recommendations right now. It is on YouTube, and it is called He's Coming to Me. And GMM TV, who are the producers, have the YouTube upload and the channel, so the quality is pretty good. But it is subtitled, but oh, it's great. So there's your recommendation. I'm sure I'll have more new ones for you soon, because that's been my quarantine addiction. There's some awesome comments about in the Facebook thread here about what people are hoarding and eating, and I will come back and reread them all and learn more about it. Dita asks if my mom would be willing to part with the green tomato and apple chutney recipe, I think. So she has jealously guarded this recipe. And then recently, I think she's beginning to feel her mortality and realize that she must pass this recipe on. So she actually had helpers help her make the chutney, the last batch we did. And well, we did. I say we, as if I were involved. And I am on the docket to go out and help her 1 year so that I learn at the feet of greatness the secrets of the chutney. But as of now, there's no written recipe. Partly because she just does it kind of like haphazard, you know, Victorian chef style. Like I just throw the things in. So somebody, namely me, probably has to go out there and write it all down while it's happening, or film it or something, so that I learn. Gina asked if I enjoy cooking too. I do. I like cooking more than baking. I guess I'm more of an artistic approach than I am a mathematical approach. I will take up baking, and then I will spend like a month trying to get one recipe exactly right and to the taste of all of my friends to take to potlucks. But without potlucks or anything, I just don't bother to bake. So like I got obsessed with learning how to make gluten-free, boozy cupcakes for a while there. And I just spent like 2 years figuring out the best booze, like the tequila lime variant and the rum raisin variant or whatever. But mostly I like to cook. I prefer to cook. I do like, my partner is always awed because I like to make my plates really pretty, even if I'm just making myself like an egg white omelet or something. And I have, yeah, so I like quick cooking, like stir fry. I was raised with stir fries, veggie stir fries. And so I like that kind of food, and, you know, occasionally some stews or something like that. I like things that I can kind of taste and tinker with as I go along. I like the futzing that the cooking permits as opposed to baking. Baking, you have to just put it all together and then leave it alone, and I'm scared. It scares me. Yeah, Emma asked the same question. Am I a cook? I actually am a decent cook, yeah. I'm not ashamed of that. If you don't care about things, sorry. I am probably the world's least picky eater, which means that I will try everything, and when I am cooking, like, it's a no holds bars sort of situation. So I will cook something. If the recipe calls for it to be very spicy, it will be very spicy. I don't leave stuff out. I always try the recipe authentically first, and then I'll start tinkering with it to make it something my own. The other thing I do with savory food is I am under the impression there's almost nothing that leafy greens cannot and should not go into. So spinach, chard, bok choy, all those sorts of things. I like, even if a recipe doesn't call for it, I will almost always, like, I will do chili on top of a bed of wilted spinach. I love leafy greens, and I think they will stop you from dying if you eat enough of them. That's my theory. And so I eat lots of leafy greens. Rainbow chowder is probably my favorite, but I like them all. So that is one of my weird quirks. If you ever have Gail cooking for you, be aware there will be leafy greens involved. People are sharing links to recipes and chats. Again, check out the comments. Emma is asking about Vixen Ecology, so we'll jump to that. Let's pretend I'm a writer for a second. You know. So what can I tell you about it? Well, here, I can tell you that it's not showing you the full cover. Oh, God. There we go. There it is. What can I tell you about it? It is a very short story, so it is on the shorter end of one of my short stories. It's interstitial, so it will not explain anything about that couple. So if you don't know anything about Mana and Lovejoy from having read the San Andreas books, you probably won't understand what's going on. I didn't write it to be an introduction to the series or anything like that. It is dark. So I had my 4 normal beta readers did a read, and then I pulled in another beta reader for this one because I needed a tiebreaker, because 2 beta readers thought it was fine and 2 beta readers thought it was too dark. And my tiebreaker also thought it was too dark. So I have to revise it a bit. I might still release it just with a warning that it's dark. It still has a happy ending, don't worry. But it's a totally different style. I wrote it in a kind of fairy tale style, so it has a sort of underwater stream of consciousness amorphous feel to it. And the idea is sort of the sensation that you're being dragged underhill by the fae kind of concept. Because it's kind of exploring the sinister side of Mana and having lived for so long and being ancient. I'm always very... writing paranormal, that always interests me the most is the psychology of the individual who has lived to see cycles of history repeated constantly over and over again, and how you survive that kind of immortal fatigue without fracturing. And so this short is a little bit of an exploration of that. And as such, it got a bit dark. Sorry. So I've set it aside for a possible kind of mini enforced retreat that I might be going on. And then I'll do a little revision at that juncture and see if I can't lift it a little bit. I don't think I'm going to change it that much, but I think it's a little bit like Back to Cooking at the anthology, sort of adding a little squeeze of lemon juice at the end of a dish. It needs a little brightness, so we'll see what I can do with that. How dark is dark? I will say that for those of you who aren't familiar with the San Andreas series, Mana and Lovejoy have a slight BDSM relationship. And so the darkness comes from that dynamic. And it's told from the submissive's perspective. It's told from Lovejoy's perspective. So that is where the darkness is vested. So there's the warning for you all. But like I said, when I release it, I'll talk a little bit more about, like some of the struggles I've had with it, just as a warning in case anybody wants to avoid reading it. Helen asks if I'm in a proper lockdown. Alameda County, which is where I am, is in fact in a full official lockdown. Which isn't like curfew, the purge restriction kind of lockdown. It is basically, we were briefly open for like curbside distanced food service and stuff like that. And now we're back to everything is takeout. Non-essential businesses are pretty much all shut, restricted internal access. So like for those stores where you need to go inside to pay, it's one person at a time, at least in my town, just that sort of thing. So, you're allowed to be out with your bubble masked going for a walk, but no gatherings of any kind, no assemblies, no parties, nothing, none of that sort of thing. So yeah. That's basically, which is the first so California, the state of California went into a lockdown under Gavin Newsom, our governor, pretty early on, like March, April. So this is just the same version of that, although the whole of the state hasn't gone down this time. It's just county by county. And in our case, it's being based on the capacity of the emergency rooms. So if the emergency rooms are at like 75% capacity or something like that, they put the county into lockdown, just because they're scared of taxing legitimately of taxing the medical system. So yeah. Woo, yeah, there you go. Rosalind answered the question. Here in California, we're based on ICU capacities in hospitals. So yes. Moving on. I'm looking for more questions. Sorry if there's little gaps. Oh, I need to figure out what time it is too. Oh, okay. So we still have a half hour. Emma says they recently read the wonderful Sorcery and Cecilia books. And have I ever played the letter game? Oh my goodness, what a cool question. Right, so for those of you who don't know, Sorcery and Cecilia is one of my favorite books. It's by Carolyn Severmore and Patricia Reedy. It is a wonderful Regency Gaslamp fantasy. I highly recommend it. I tend to say if you are looking for something like the first book, like Soulless, and you don't mind epistolatory, which is what these are, that Sorcery and Cecilia is probably the closest book out there in existence that's like Soulless. I adore that book. The story behind Sorcery and Cecilia is great. It is two authors who met and became very friendly and decided to do something called a letter game, which basically is where you invent a world with another writer, and then you write physical letters as if you were pen pals back and forth, but you do it in character. And so you come up with a little bit of a backstory as to why your characters are separated. Like one of them has gone away to school, one of them stays home, one of them goes to London for a season, one of them stays in the village. And then you tell a story back and forth of your two characters as your two characters. And yes, I was very much inspired by reading Sorcerer Cecilia when I was a teenager, and my best friend and I did did the letter game. So we did it for a fantasy series that was extremely derivative of our favorite fantasy series because we were like 14 or something. I was in England staying with my grandparents or something like that. So the letter game is in fact on like thin vellum-y air paper from back in the day. So we were sending them back and forth to Europe. I was in the UK and she was here. And we did a full book that way, but it's terrible. I mean, we were 14 or it's not good, but it's really fun. And I own them all. I scanned them all, so I have digital versions so that it will never be lost for posterity, but it's not good. And then we were planning on doing another one. We were going to do another version of it as a sci-fi, and we never ended up doing it, but we did all the world building for it, and the world building for that sci-fi is what would become Crudrat. So for those of you who have listened to Crudrat, my full cast audiobook, the original inspiration for Crudrat was actually the beginnings of a new letter game, which eventually never happened, but I really liked the kind of dark matter technology and stuff that we'd come up with for that science fiction world, and so I adopted it and wrote an Crudrat set in that, who was not at all like the character that I was going to be writing in the letter game. But yes, so I've played one full version of the letter game as a kid, and then I've written a project based off of the letter game. So yes, letter game, it's a lot of fun. I think it's really cool practice for being a writer. Flavor. Sorry, I'm just reading comments. I'm hungry. Yeah, people are like, I'm hungry now. Sorry, I do that. My books will make you hungry. I will make you hungry. It's best to have eaten before you interface with me in any way, I suppose. Gina asks if I enjoy seasonal teas. I tend to. This is interesting because as a general rule, I'm pretty much, English breakfast, Assam, pure leaves, I'm pretty purist where tea is concerned. But in the winter and when it gets cold, I do like a spiced black tea. I like the kind of spiced black tea that takes milk. So I like chais and unsweetened chais. And I also really like, there's a Thai tea that I really love, which isn't spiced, but sort of that perfuminess that you get. So Thai iced tea you might have encountered. There's a hot version of that, which I love. And then there's a cinnamon tea, a couple of different variants on a cinnamon tea that I also really like. So I do like a spiced black tea in the winter in particular. There's something about the warming nature of spices, I guess. Maybe it reminds me of mulled wine and apple cider. Emma asks, did anything surprise me about the publication reaction to the heroine's journey? No, maybe? I'm not sure. Honestly, I haven't really paid that close of attention to it. Poor little book. Should have gotten more love from me. But it has been embraced by authors in a way that I am flattered by. There is always a part of me whenever I release a book that's like, oh, it's just going to die into oblivion and no one will care or read about it. Especially when I do something that is not for you guys, that is for my peers. Like, that's a scary thing to do, to publish something, to be like, hey, peers, here's a thing that I think you should read, because I'm so important. But I published this because I thought the subject matter was important and I needed just to get it out there into the world until somebody better than me comes along and does it better than I could. But I needed something out there. And I think most people are appreciating it from that level. So it is always, there's two, how do I put this? There's two things, right? There's the thing when you have created something with your imagination that is art, that is something that has come from the artistic place in your soul, that is like exposing your guts to the world. That is fiction writing, right? So when people love that, when you tell me you love that or you love something I have written, that is like the closest we get to sympathetic magic, I think, as humans. This, like, idea that your soul reached out and in some tiny way connected to somebody else's through complete invention. Like, how amazing is that? That's not what you get with nonfiction. What I get with nonfiction is completely different kind of feedback. I get people who tell me that, like, I have helped them figure their way through writer's block, or that I have told them a narrative that they have known about their whole lives but didn't know what to call, or that they have found a way to articulate the kind of book that they want to read and the kind of book that they gravitate towards and why they like it so much. That's a different kind of connection. That's a lot more like intellectual or academic connection. But also for me, who I have a, like, I think it comes from being a teacher, but or maybe it's just a personality thing, but I feel weirdly compelled to pay it forward. I feel like in my career I've had so many people help me out over the years, but I'm not a, like, easy personality to, like, be a mentor or something like that. And so this was kind of like my way of, in a strange way, like, sort of paying it forward to the next generation. And so it also kind of attaches to that part of my personality in terms of feedback, where I'm like, oh, like, I do get a little endorphin rush that's like, I helped somebody, like, in a tiny creative way, but still, like, I feel like I helped somebody, and that's an insanely fabulous feeling. But it is completely different from the feedback I get from fiction. And so in that regard, I guess I'm just, like, really grateful that I got to write nonfiction, like, that I eventually just sucked it up and had the guts to do it, because, you know, there was a good chance that I was never going to do it because I was too scared. Nonfiction you can get called on so easily, you know? Like, fiction, I'm just like, yeah, it's whatever my dumb brain spit out, but this is, like, my dumb brain trying to collate information that I think is necessary and try to make it consumable to a general audience, and that's really hard. So I am unbelievably grateful when anybody gives me feedback that book helped them. So I guess that's the surprise, in a way, is that I didn't realize it would feel differently to get feedback. That was the surprising thing. Is that I you know, I'm used to feedback. I'm used to people who hate my books because it's not their book or it's not their style, and that's fine. And I'm used to people who love it because because Alexia spoke to them, or Mana did, or anything, you know, right? So, but this is different, and so the feedback is different, and so the sensation that I get from that feedback is different, and that's been, it's been crazy. It's been amazing, like, but way different than I thought it would be. Dina asked if I've ever had rice lamande. I don't even know how to pronounce that. Is it a rice-based thing or a marmalade-based thing, or am I completely on crack? You have to tell me more. Maybe I've had it by a different name. This is what I'm learning with with Northern European cuisine. Oh, will I be watching Recipe for Seduction with Mario Lopez? No, but it sounds really good, so I'll put it on the docket. Doc is asking about a Hallmark movie had a restaurant change its country of origin every week. I don't know much about Hallmark. I'm sorry. I'm not on the doggerel side of that. And Doc, I can't read the rest of your question. Are those real? Oh. Yeah, I don't know, Doc. I don't know how Hallmark works. I'm sorry. I wish I did. I'm not good. Emma asks what I expect in 2021 regarding my books. Well, I have a deadline. I don't know how that happened. I worked so hard to not have deadlines anymore, and now I have a deadline. And I'm not sure I'm going to make that deadline, but I think most of the publishing industry right now is pretty much expecting authors to blow deadlines right and left, because we, like everybody else, are not handling things well. So yeah, it's for a third novella, and I have bits of it written and an outline, so I can do it, but I'm just really struggling to write right now. I have actually completed, I wrote that project partly for Nano, which is this techno fantasy that I've been gurgling on about for ages, which suddenly spat out into the world, mostly because I was desperate to write something and it was the only thing that wanted to be written, so I wrote it. I don't know what I'm going to do with that, but something will probably happen with it next year, since it's pretty much the only thing I managed to write this year, so we'll see. Like, it's one of those things where, like, I think everything in 2020 is sort of like, if you manage to be creative, you're just like, I don't even have the brain to judge the thing I created anymore. I don't have any baseline. Like, my baseline is weird and skewed and off, so I don't know. So I'm probably actually going to send that project, once I've done its revision pass, to my agent and just get her take on it. Because she's, you know, we've been together for 10, 11 years now, and she's brutally honest with me, and she'll just be like, this is not commercial quality, or this is terrible by any standpoint, or she might be like, this is great, we should sell it. So, in which case I may or may not take a trade contract again. I don't know. It would depend on how and what house and all that sort of thing. So yeah, the 2021 is pretty amorphous for me, which is weird, because you know me, I usually have a concrete plan. And part of that is because my concrete plan is almost always vested in how many writing retreats I'm doing. And of course, for the foreseeable future, I'm not doing any writing retreats. So those are the places I tend to bang out the most words, and I just haven't had any, or so haven't done any big big project churnouts. So, I'm scared. We'll see. I am scrolling through, looking for other questions. Jameson asked if I watch archaeological documentaries. That's a loaded question. Sometimes. Mostly no. I get very frustrated with archaeological documentaries. I get really frustrated with, like, history documentaries, especially if it's something that touches on anything that was my expertise. And I get very frustrated with plaques in museums, because I know, it's a case of just, like, I want more information than they provide, because the information I want is, like, you know, statistical analysis and graphs and materials analysis and stuff that, like, no one but me is interested in, which, so I get, like, it's not quality, what I want is not quality film, so mostly I don't, because I get annoyed. I cut things much more allowance if it's not in my area. So if it's a part of the world that I never touched on, or if it doesn't have anything to do with a materials analysis. So, like, you know, like an analysis of the Iceman, for example, would be very fascinating for me, because I'm not a bioarchaeologist. I didn't do archviz, and I know nothing about prehistory. So it doesn't touch on any of my expertise. So I'll watch something like that quite happily. But I'm not, generally speaking, a huge documentary person. Gina is asking about Vixen Ecology and whether I knew it would be dark. I did not know it would be dark. It just went that way. And actually, I didn't think it was that dark until I sent it out to my beta readers, and they were all, this is dark. And I was like, it is? Didn't feel that dark. And then I went back and reread it, and I was like, oh, shoot. So yeah, it's just a short. So the thing is with short stories, which I don't write very often, I don't consider myself a short story writer. But because I do think it's an art form, and I have mastered it. I do it like I do it for you guys as a sort of, you know, fan service kind of thing. But short stories are the only things I don't write to outline. I just let them happen. So they are whatever creature they are. I tend to have just like a single point of concept and a couple of characters that I want to explore, and I use a short story to do that. So yeah, that's why short stories don't often run away from me, because I don't pants as an author. I'm not that kind of writer. So, like, I'm never tempted to write any more than what the original idea was. But it also means I never know what they are when I start writing them. And they're the only thing that I'm just completely fluid about. I just sort of let them vomit forth and see what happens. Oh, Lavender has a good question. Is there a certain book or other media that I go back to for the holidays? I used to occasionally get into Hallmark movies, like genuinely, for no good reason. Really, there isn't a good reason. Just because they're fluffy. but I don't really have a piece of media that I'm like, it's the holidays, we have to watch X, or I need to read X. There are a couple of like fun short stories and like short books that I really enjoy. Like Villain for Christmas is one of my favorite by Alice Waters, which is about a supervillain who falls in love with a superhero. But it's not really Christmassy, even though that's the title. You know, so I'll pick up and reread some of those just to try and get myself in the wintry spirit. I do like a forced proximity book, you know, people being snowed in together, whether it's for murder or romance, I don't really care which. That kind of thing. But yeah, by and large, I don't really have media. That's interesting. I like Christmas lights. They don't really count. I just like lights. So I like the smell of pine. But yeah, I don't really gravitate to anything. Robert asks, have I ever thought of writing a book with a cook or a chef as a lead character? Oh yes. Yeah, I think that would be really fun. All the food. The next Tinkered Stars book I want to write has a Great British Baking theme, which I've alluded to many times, and now I'm just going to say it outright. I haven't started writing that book or even really thought about it much, but that's what it's going to be an alien cooking competition on the space station. Triss and Dre have to deal with, and I think it will be hilarious. And of course, somebody gets murdered. Probably the Paul Hollywood character. So yes, that will involve a lot of alien cuisine, but that's just me having a good time. But yeah, I think it would be fun. I should do a cook character at some point. A cook character hasn't leapt into my head yet as a main character, but I wouldn't rule it out. I would love to read a series, like a space opera series, where the main character is like the cook on a spaceship rather than the captain or something like that. It's just the like lower decks version of what's going on, and that'd be really fun. I mean, I swear to God, you guys, cooking will leak into my books no matter what. So I'm writing this techno fantasy, which is like a highly restrictive post-Planetfall world. But this is the book I just finished writing. And so all they have are vegetative matter. So everything's going to have been genetically engineered and stuff. Everybody is basically vegan. And they've lost kind of record access of ancient Earth. But one of the things that they do, because I wrote this, is they're really invested in trying to discover old recipes, literally old world recipes, and remake them and invent them. And so the university where the book is set has a recipe club who investigate and try and find the old recipes, and then a cooking club who try to make these recipes. And they turned, of course, it was just me like offhanded throwing this idea out into the wilderness when I was first writing this book at the beginning of the book, and then it became a very important plot point by the end. I was like, of course, even in a far future techno fantasy, cooking and food became vitally important to my book because that's just the way it is. So I suppose you could say that the main character of this book that I just finished writing is a cook of a kind. He's kind of a magical cook, but he is a cook. And they spend a lot of time trying to figure out bao, among other things. And eating noodles, because apparently it's my personal theory that noodles are the food of the future. Everyone just eats noodles all the time. Where like it's in Tinkered Stars, everyone's eating noodles all the time, and in this new book, everyone eats noodles all the time because noodles. Why not? Noodles are great. Jane asked, who would I like to play the letter game with today? If I were gonna play a game, the letter game again, I would probably do it with my best friend, who was the first person I did it with. She's terribly unreliable and inconsistent. So I might do it with my friend Dan, who I did the NaNoWriMo podcast with. Because we could write pretty happily back and forth. I think that would be really fun. But I would probably do it with a friend. I mean, you know, you'd be tempted to say a famous author's name that you wanted to do this with, but I think I would probably just choose an author friend who I knew and whose style I was comfortable with at this juncture in my life. Robin asks if I have my own chai, have I ever made my own chai mix? I found a recipe. Yum. I bet, yes. I have seen, you know, recipes and YouTube videos and stuff about making your own chai, but I found one that's really, really good. It's like a little powdered concentrate and it's great. It's very strong, which is how I like my chai, strong in both black tea-ness and caffeine-ness, but also in spice profile. I like a low cardamom, high black pepper, high ginger, high cinnamon profile to my chai. I don't know which region that comes from. I'm sorry. I've never traveled in India, but that's the kind of chai I like. And so I found somebody who does it, and therefore I don't bother to make it myself. That's kind of my attitude, frankly, with baking and cooking, is if somebody around me does it better than I could, I just order or eat it from them. And then if I find something I really want to try and I can't try it from a restaurant or a food vendor or a street vendor or a bakery, then I'll try and figure out how to make it myself. Sorry, I got distracted by interesting comments. I'm supposed to be looking for just questions. Scanning for questions, scanning. I need to come up with a little song that I sing while I'm scanning for questions. I wish Facebook had a different way of doing this. Ooh, Lavender. Lavender asks, two insider trading questions at the 11th hour on the Q&A. Stop asking questions, by the way, everybody. I'll do a rapid fire at the end soon, but we'll start with this, which I will rapidly answer, which is Lavender wants to know if I have any thoughts on the publisher merger or the Disney contract issue. The publisher merger is basically that Penguin Random bought Simon & Schuster, which means in the course of my career as an author, we have gone from 6 big publishers in New York to 4 big publishers, or 3 big publishers and 1 mega corporation in the guise of Random Penguin. I don't think it's great. That's my feeling. Fewer publishers is fewer publishers, whether it's absorbed or not. So yeah, it's not great for trad, but then trad has been in a rocky situation for, you know, at least 5 or 6 years now. The Disney contract issue is the recent release of information that Disney, when they bought the Star Wars franchise, stopped paying their work for hire authors owed royalties. Which is kind of just shitty, because it's not like it's going to be a huge amount of money for Disney. Work for hire tie-in books aren't, you know, they do well, but they're not like the major moneymaker for a franchise like Star Wars. That's all going to be in merchandising, not books. I hate to say it to you, my lovely readers, but books are not the moneymaker of pop culture and the media. But yeah, it turns out that they've just not been paying their authors, I guess, which is awful. But, you know, they'll get a class action lawsuit, I certainly hope and expect. So yeah, I believe the authors. I'm not going to believe Disney in this matter, so yeah. Avery asks if I visit any of the locations where my books are set. Most of them, yes. I like to take my characters to places I've gone to, which prior to the current era, so shall we just assume that that's how I'm speaking from henceforth. If I traveled to a place, I have started to actively go to like national history museums and pick up books about that place's time. Like, so for example, I put Singapore into competence. Well, I don't have it here, but I put Singapore into competence because I went to the Singapore Writers Festival. I loved their National History Museum, and they had like specialty books in English, of course, because that's their primary language, for those who don't know, in Singapore. But I picked up these books that were about like the 1890s, which I knew was the time period for the Custard Protocol series in Singapore. So I have like primary research books, and there were primary sources in there that were like signs and streets and photographs and all that sort of thing. So I've gone from like actively using places I used to travel to, specifically as an archaeologist, to like when I'm traveling to a place, thinking in terms of maybe setting something there at some point and kind of like collecting research manuals as a result of that. Now I haven't, like I love to do Edinburgh. I went to Edinburgh. I have a bunch of research that I did when I was there, and I'm excited to maybe set something there at some point. and Pillicree, which is a little town on the just into the Highlands. So, yeah, I do think in terms of that now. I do that, and I'm like that partly because I think I am an archaeologist. So the sense of place is like important to me in terms of like, and I talk about this, Piper and I have a 20-minute delay episode, which I recommend to everybody. It's a podcast that we do. We are both authors, and we have 2 episodes where we talk about writing in setting as travelers, and movies and media as setting, and the setting that they show as travelers, and why books make us want to travel places, or movies will make us want to travel places. So we go more in depth into this, but for me, I feel like there's things about the air and the smell and like the motes in the air and the sounds of the bugs and stuff that you don't really get even now in these days of Google Earth and really being able to look at things if you haven't actually traveled somewhere. So I do try to, I really try hard to have traveled to a place I talk about. That said, if I can't get there, like Japan, I've never been to Japan. I've always wanted to go, but I've never managed to go. But I do get a sensitivity reader, usually a historian and resident of that place. So a historian in that time and so a friend of a friend of a friend found me a Japanese historian who's an expert on the Meiji Restoration period of Japan, and I had him and who could read English, and I had him yay, check over, that section of reticence for accuracy. Even though I had to be like, it's not really historical, it's steampunk. Do you know what steampunk is? But it all worked out at the end. But yeah, I do prefer to travel to places. So a lot of the places that are in my books are places I've been. Almost all of the archaeological sites are. At least places that I visited, if not actually worked on. Dick asks if my sister's song is a dark story. No, I would not call it dark. I wouldn't call any of my shorts particularly dark. The ones that currently are out in the world. Can I get the title again for the superhero supervillain love story? Sure. I think it is called A Villain for Christmas. And it is by Alice Waters, I think. I could be totally wrong. Drop me an email or a calling card and I'll get it out to you properly. It might be if you Google Gail Carriger holiday reads, I think I have a blog post, and I'm sure it's in that blog post. So that might be the best way to get the correct title. I am so bad on titles and author names. I can remember my own author name because it's mine, but I can't even remember my own titles half the time anymore. You guys, my brain is, it's not good. I'm not doing well. I'm losing my mind. It's a good thing I mostly pour forth ridiculousness into the world. But it does mean I can't remember anything anymore. Right, I'm just scrolling to see if we have any last questions before we shut this down. And it looks like... I'm sorry if I've missed your question. Oh, I'm so bad. If you want to plop any final questions in, I can always come back and double check them and write you a reply. Oh, and Frankie is saying that I was correct. So, yay. Thank you, Frankie. It's very funny, that book, The Villain for Christmas. It's just hilarious. It's just charming and hilarious. And who doesn't want that for the Christmas season, frankly, right now? So give that one a whirl. Yeah, I guess that's it. Thank you all for tuning in for Gail Talks a lot about food and a little bit about books. And I'll return you to your regularly scheduled programming next year, I guess it will be, for January Live. I really hope to be doing doing a live the second weekend in January, but there is a slim chance that I might be in a part of the world where there isn't great internet. But I'll probably schedule one just in case, but just be aware that it might get postponed. But thank you all for showing up so much and for asking fabulous questions as always. And I hope you have wonderful holidays. Please stay healthy and safe. I need all the readers I can get. And in the immortal words of the Car Talk guys. Yeah, and read fun stuff, love each other, and I'll see you in 2021. Bye.